She did not weep when they brought her the news. She did not fall to her knees. She did not scream his name into the rafters of the palace the way the other wives did. Oya stood very still, and the wind in the courtyard stopped with her. Sango was gone. The king who ruled with thunder in his fists had walked into the earth rather than be taken by his enemies. And the kingdom of Oya waited to see who would break first. Oya did not break. She changed. And in that single moment, before the drums of mourning had even begun, something ancient and terrible began to stir behind her eyes. To understand what she became, you must first understand what she was. Long before she was a goddess, Oya was a woman who walked into danger as if it were an invitation. She was clever in ways that frightened other women, and beautiful in ways that frightened other men. She did not ask for permission. When Sango first crossed her path, he was already a king, already feared, already wrapped in the kind of power that made lesser men kneel without being asked. Oya did not kneel. She watched him the way a hunter watches fire, with respect and without fear. She became his favorite wife not through softness, but through daring. While his other wives tended to comfort and ceremony, Oya wanted his secrets. She wanted to know where his power slept when he was not raging. And so in the quiet hours when a king lowers his guard for the one he trusts most, Sango gave her what no one else had ever been given. He taught her the words that called the storm. He showed her the charms that turned breath into thunder. It was meant to be a gift between lovers. It became the beginning of her becoming something the world had never seen. The elders whispered that no mortal should hold such fire and remain unchanged. They were right. The first time Oya spoke the words Sango had given her, the sky above Oyo cracked open, and for one heartbeat, the thunder that answered did not sound like her husband's. It sounded like her own. She did not tell him. Some powers once tasted are too precious to surrender back to silence. There are nights the old storytellers described carefully, almost fearfully. Nights when Oya would leave the palace walls and walk into the bush alone. They say her shadow would stretch and shift along the grass, and where a woman had been walking, a great buffalo would stand instead, breath steaming, horns catching what little moonlight pushed through the clouds. She moved between forms the way other people moved between rooms. Woman to beast, beast to wind, wind to woman again. The buffalo was not a disguise. It was a truth she carried inside her, one that mortal skin could only barely contain. This was Oya's first secret. Her second was more dangerous still. She did not fear death the way the other wives feared it. She walked near it. Long before she ever wore the title of goddess, she had already begun circling the boundary between the world of the living and the world that waits beyond it. Drawn to that threshold the way some people are drawn to deep water, unable to explain why, only knowing they must look. When the conflict came that would end Sango's reign as a mortal king, Oya did not hide behind palace walls like the others. She stood beside him in the open as enemies gathered, as old rivals and bitter chiefs moved against the throne he had built on fire and fear. She had his secrets now. She had his thunder living inside her own blood. And when betrayal closed in from every side, when his own choices and his own pride finally caught up to him beneath the heavy sky of Oyo, it was Oya who refused to look away. Sango chose the earth over surrender. He walked beneath the great tree at Koso, spoke words no living person fully understood, and let the ground take him rather than let his enemies see him fall. The kingdom called it shameful. The kingdom called it madness. Oya called it nothing at all, because in the moment the earth closed over the king who had given her fire, something inside her did not break. It opened. Grief, for an ordinary woman, ends in tears. For Oya, grief became a doorway. She walked beyond the palace, beyond the markets, beyond the fields where mourners still wailed his name. She walked until the wind itself bent toward her like a subject toward a new ruler. The storm that had once answered to Sango's voice now answered to hers without hesitation, without memory of who had taught it first. Lightning did not ask permission to follow her. Rain did not wait to be summoned. The same charms that had once been a gift between husband and wife now belonged entirely to her, and they would never belong to anyone else again. The other Orishas felt it before they understood it. A change moving through the spiritual order of things, swift and absolute. Oya had not simply inherited a piece of her husband's power. She had become something that had never existed in the pantheon before, a force whose entire nature was change itself. Where other Orishas governed iron, or wisdom, or the sea, Oya now governed the moment one thing becomes another. Life becomes death, calm becomes storm, woman becomes buffalo, king becomes legend. Nothing that came near her was permitted to remain exactly as it had been. It is said the river Niger itself bent to carry her name after this, its violent currents and sudden floods becoming her signature the way thunder had once been her husband's. Fishermen learned to read the water's mood the way they once read the sky before a storm, because Oya did not warn before she acted. She simply arrived, and the world rearranged itself around her arrival. But it was at the threshold between worlds that her true nature was finally revealed in full. The old stories say that every soul, in the instant it crosses from the world of the living into whatever lies beyond, encounters her first. Not as a goddess of vengeance, not as a goddess of war, but as the final presence standing at the gate, the one who governs the most violent and necessary transformation any being will ever undergo. Birth had its guardians, marriage had its blessings, but death belonged to Oya alone, because death is the ultimate metamorphosis, and metamorphosis had always been her truest domain, long before she ever wore the title of goddess. She is said to stand at the edge of the cemetery gates even now, where the wind turns suddenly cold, and the dust rises without explanation. Mourners who feel a sharp gust pass through a burial ground are taught not to curse it, but to bow their heads, because that wind is not random. It is recognition. It is Oya marking the passage of one more soul across the threshold she alone commands. She did not mourn Sango the way the kingdom expected, because mourning would have meant accepting an ending. Oya does not believe in endings. She believes only in the moment just before one thing becomes another. The breath before the storm, the silence before the buffalo charges, the stillness before the soul finally understands it is already crossing over. This is why, of all the Orishas who walk the spiritual order of the Yoruba pantheon, none are approached with more caution than Oya. Sango is feared for his wrath, Ogun is feared for his blade, but Oya is feared for something far older and far less escapable. She does not destroy, she transforms, and nothing, not kings, not rivers, not grief itself, not even death, is permitted to stay the same once it has passed beneath her gaze. To this day, when the wind shifts without warning and the sky darkens too quickly to explain, the old ones do not call it weather. They call it her arrival, and they remember the truth carried down through generations of storytellers, that long before she ruled the storm, she was simply a woman who looked into the fire a king offered her, and chose, without hesitation, to burn.